All right, so I am very excited. Welcome to the Saturnalia Chateau. A big thank you to our partners at EY, to Michael Bassick, my co-host. I am Scott Stedman from the Imaginarium. So excited to be at the Saturnalia Chateau with Jenny Lewis, the president and CMO of The Knot. Hello.
Hello.
Jenny is a Saturnalian and someone I have an enormous amount of admiration for. I wanted to start by telling a little about The Knot and let you describe a little bit about the work you're doing there. The Knot is at the intersection of a very passionate experience for your customer. I thought that'd be a interesting way to sort of begin. How do you navigate some of the complexity of your customers' sort of the moment in time in which they rely upon you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are a few occasions in life, I think, that pack as much weight as hosting a wedding. So it's something that we take really seriously. And I think what we've done to try and harness that moment, first we have an expression that we use internally. We've never really used it in marketing materials called FOMO. That's fear of messing up, which kind of like guides our mindset. And because that is so the mindset of our couples, is they're in this kind of like fear, I don't want to do anything wrong. What if I forget this? What if I forget that? So we really try and provide some reassurance along the way, but we want to infuse some fun. We did a rebrand about a year and a half ago after I joined. And the whole genesis of it was our brand was looking incredibly like elder millennial, tired, felt like we were going to get washed away as Gen Z came in. So we needed to refresh some things. But B, we were feeling like we were in the Sea of Sameness where all of the wedding industry was like pastels and pinks and like soft greens and just everything. If you looked at our imagery next to Zola's, next to brides, next to you name it, it all kind of looked the same. And so what we've tried to do through the rebrand is both look distinctive as well as try and bring a little bit of fun and celebration into it. So we intentionally moved away from a generic pastel palette to something that is a bit more like black and white with pops of really bright colors. So that hopefully couples, when they're in this moment of passion, they feel reassured by the tools that we offer, but they also hopefully can have some fun and enjoy the process a little bit too.
Well, so that's very interesting. It sounds like you're not necessarily that you're leaning out of like the sort of cliched affects of like wedding celebration, but that you're broadening it a little bit. One thing I'm curious about is when you own such a specific moment that doesn't repeat that often in most people's lives, maybe once or twice. How and as a brand, you're a business, and you're obviously considering the LTV of your customers. How do you approach that? Is there are there ways that you're able to extend kind of the relationship between the Knot and your customers? Speak maybe if you want to share a little about the thinking there.
Yeah, great question. So the average engagement length is about 18 months. So we have this very fascinating business that we acquire somebody. We're an acquisition powerhouse. About 80% of all couples join us at some point or another during their wedding journey. Wow. And then they stick with us for about 18 months. What we found, we tried to extend LTV and lifecycle through a couple strategic acquisitions. The Bump is one of our sub brands as well too, which the intention there was first you get married, then you have a baby, and hopefully we can cross-sell you to stick with us. There were some advantages in terms of the audience and the retargeting, but ultimately the thesis really didn't pan out as expected. Just the connection points between those two mindsets. It's not linear. Not everybody's getting married then having a baby. In fact, many people are having babies and then getting married. And so the kind of high-level nature of it just sort of fell apart. But B, a lot of the audience data that we were having ultimately was pretty easily replicable if through many of our tools at Meta and others, that the advantage was marginal, I would say. So where we've netted out is just really running the Bump as a separate standalone business, and the Knot, and both of them are healthy businesses on their own. So instead of trying to focus on how do we extend post-wedding, we're most focused on how do we maximize that 18 months and how do we just get return usage over and over to create real product stickiness.
Very interesting. Very cool. So when you're talking about, you're an acquisition machine, right? How your job as the CMO and also being responsible for some of the businesses, how how does that work, right? Like, what has made you such an acquisition engine, and have you faced? What are the challenges that you've faced being a fairly legacy business at this time? How have you evolved with those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, we have the Knot brand. So I'll caveat, I've been there for about 2 years. So a lot of the heritage and history and brand value that was built, I am far from responsible for. It is my job to maintain it and not mess it up. So I think it benefits tremendously from the heritage and being so associated with weddings. It also benefits from that there aren't a ton of options or major players, and it has been an SEO machine. And so much of our traffic and much of our demand top of funnel was built off organic search. We have, I would say, a lot of my tenure as CMO has been trying to shake that up a bit. Because as we know, or many of us know, if you're a marketer in the room, being heavily reliant and concentrated on Google is a very scary place to be. It is quite the hamster wheel that you find yourselves on. And especially if a good percentage of your paid budget is also going to SEM, my God, then like Google basically owns your business at that point. So we are right now actively trying to diversify and really train and learn other acquisition channels, and also just build a badass product that people want to use with a brand that is highly top of mind, because that's ultimately how you get out of that hamster wheel, is that people remember you, they think of you and the product that you're delivering. They don't need to go to Google to find it because they know you have what they need. So that's been a lot of our strategy right now, and it's starting to really work. We've had some unlocks with some channels. We launched our first ever integrated marketing campaign last year and just learned a ton through doing so of some new channels that we've been really reticent to trial before, because we were SEM has been such a known acquisition channel for us for so long. But I'm pleased to see that like we're starting to broaden the aperture so that we can think both a little bit more top of funnel, because we really want to acquire couples when they're newly engaged so that we can maximize those 18 months. And we want to do so with a message that hopefully will be really resonant, that gets our value prop clearly in front of them so they keep coming back.
So I have two follow-ups to that.
Yeah.
One, the Google leak. I'm reading a lot on LinkedIn, the big Google SEO leak. Is that something that it seemed like,
seemed like a big deal.
Seemed like a big deal. Even our team was doing a lot of work on that for the B2B space where we operate. But were there surprises in that for you as such a company so reliant on SEO?
So I am by no means an SEO expert. Fortunately, there's people on my team that are. And the first thing I also saw it and was like, oh my God, and pinged our SEO lead and was like, this must be incredible. What did we learn? Tell me everything. And he's like, no, we kind of know all this. And we got a write up, and there were a few things that were more or less validating. But I think if you were a close follower of SEO, which fortunately, again, we have some of those in-house, given how heavily reliant our traffic has been on it historically, I don't think anything was a massive shock. It was just a lot of like kind of validations along the way, which is good.
Yeah.
Didn't have to massively change our strategy, so that's nice.
Yeah, being validated by a leak is always the best case scenario. The last question I have is related when you're obviously very excited to be launching your first real integrated omni-channel kind of marketing campaign. So as you're building brand awareness and sort of building your brand equity and your customer, what did you find worked the best? Were there any surprises for you as that rolled out?
Yes, actually. Good question. So we are one of humble media budget means. I come from a brand, I was at Uber before this. Uber benefited from like multi-hundreds of $million media budgets. That is not the world I am in today. So the playbook that we applied at Uber, which relied heavily on video, things like CTV and OLV, just when you have the budgets that we're operating within, it was hard to get the breakthrough. So I wasn't necessarily surprised by that, but I think it was a good learning for us of that probably isn't going to be where we play at this stage in the game. Where we were able to optimize and see a ton of a really strong conversion was on social. No massive surprise there. TikTok was a real performer for us. Pinterest was a real performer. Instagram always has been to an extent, although less so than TikTok. So maybe we should talk about that later, how we can unlock. And what we found was a lot of our we worked with an amazing agency. I'd worked with them before. They did some beautiful ads. they were not our strongest performing. And what was winning was things that were more organic, creator-led, creator-driven, things that felt really natural and organic in that space. So again, nothing revolutionary, but I would say somewhat validating. And so we were testing various things that were more home produced and in-house ads and so forth alongside those. I think both serve a purpose, but when we're looking at driving some of that breakthrough top of funnel, just hooking them with something that feels really native to the platform that they're in seems to work best.
Do you ever worry, and this will be my last question, but do you ever worry in a situation like that where you get these really high-performing creator-led ads, the data says they're rocking, but you know that they don't quite have, and maybe in your case they do, but oftentimes they don't have the same emphasis on the distinctive assets of your brand. They may be very thrilling to a consumer, but are they generating kind of the long-term brand equity and salience that, how do you balance that in the data? And I'm honestly curious because we think a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, I think you need both. And I think that that's kind of part of it is you can't rely on one or the other. It's not a one-trick pony. So in terms of balancing in the data, I think it's still a little bit TBD for us. But one thing that we were really focused on in this campaign is what a lot of people know The Knot for is our editorial and our magazine and content and wedding websites and planning tools. Where we make the vast majority of our revenue is through our vendor marketplace, which is effectively like a Yelp for wedding vendors where you can find a photographer, a florist, yada, yada. So we have a brand perception, in an interesting way, a brand perception problem in that our brand is known, but it's not known for what we want it to be known for. And what we did find, so for us, salience was less of the issue. It's actually the message recall of people understanding what we're selling. And creators are a really great vehicle for that because they do have captive audiences that tend to be viewing for the duration of the creative. So a creator talking about look at this amazing florist on the Knot vendor marketplace. I use them for my wedding, blah, 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 just helps us drive that message breakthrough. So I think it's a compliment versus either or.
So cool. Thank you. Well, I'd say we have time for a question. Wait,
yeah.
What's the most interesting wedding brief you ever got?
So I'm going to repeat it. What is the most interesting wedding brief that you ever got, just since we don't have microphones?
And did it tell you anything about societal change and about something that...
We don't necessarily get wedding briefs, but we do work with a lot of couples and a lot of vendors. So I would say one of the most interesting trends, I'll say, that we're seeing right now. So I mentioned our vendor marketplace. It's a bit
good pivot. Good pivot into not being we have these freaks.
Yeah. Back to our brand and my message I want to land. No, but I think what is interesting. So there's the typical vendors that you hire, like florist, photographer, venue, yada yada. We're seeing so many new categories emerging. One that is particularly popular, if you've been to the Pinterest thing, it won't surprise you, is a tattoo artist. A lot of people wanting to find tattoo artists. Content creators are a new emerging category. So it's just interesting to see how this next generation is making weddings their own. And couples are really trying to be distinctive. And we often talk about couples, and there's kind of the two sides of the brain. But one side is they're the creative director of their wedding. And how do we support them in being the creative director of their wedding and letting them know all these incredible tools they have to design what they seek. And it's a really fun opportunity for them to express themselves.
Mr. Jim Mollica.
Have you thought about a divorce marketplace? Asking for a friend. He knows my wife.
Right.
No, we have not.
That could extend the LTV.
But,
flywheel. Creating a flywheel.
Two-sided market.
They're there. I can see it.
Yeah, the lawyer of this thing. Yeah.
Yes, totally.
I look around this room, and I think half of us, not me, but half of us work in other markets. I know you have 1,000 employees in Spain. I know you've acquired other companies, including here in France. What advice do you have for those of us who are thinking more globally? What are some of the trends we're seeing in other countries?
Good one. Yes, so we do. So I'm technically CMO of The Knot worldwide, which is a holding company, basically, that's come together through a robust M&A strategy. We have 19 global brands across the world. We have Bodas in Spain, Hitched in the UK, mariages in France, matrimonio in Italy. Matrimonio is a very fun one to say. Do you want to say it?
Matrimonio.
Yes, it's beautiful. And so we do have a sizable European market presence. I think what is unique is each market has its own marriage customs. We also have an India office and an India presence. And you can imagine what a wedding is like in India versus the US.
Cool.
So I think from a global standpoint, it is being highly kind of locally focused and celebrating the local culture, but doing so hopefully in a way that feels globally relevant. It's easier said than done. I think what I have seen my Spanish team, which is where most of our European offices do particularly well, is they are real champions for what Spain needs, for what France needs, for what Italy needs. But they also very much understand the role they play in our overall portfolio, which is a smaller percentage of revenue, and understand when resources might need to go elsewhere for all the right reasons. And I would say as a US-based marketer with teams around the world, getting there is really important. Being like boots on the ground and not getting stuck in your like US coastal elite bubble, and really trying to understand what makes these cultures tick.
Other than Boston. That doesn't include us, does it?
I do too.
Boston neighbors.
Yeah.
Hey, huge what a great talk. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is the best. Thank you.
Awesome.